What's going on, guys? Demarco Crum here with the Strength with Purpose show. I have a super awesome guest for you today. A good friend of mine I've known for a few years, owns a wonderful strength facility, BearFit Athletics, has gone through a wonderful health and fitness journey of his own, overcome some amazing obstacles, and has a really incredible story today. And someone that's been very supportive of not just my physical and athletic endeavors, me using in his facility several times for some awesome kick-ass workouts, but also supporting the Fitness for Good event that we have run the last 6 years. I think we've used your facility, the last 2 or 3 years? I think it's 3 years.
Yeah, definitely. Pretty much every year since COVID. Obviously, we didn't have it then, but yeah, it was after that. Pretty much every year after that, we've had it until you moved.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, but
I
maybe
know.
we'll get
Yeah,
you to come. Maybe we'll get you to come back up just for the class. Who knows?
absolutely, man, absolutely. And it's and we I know that the obviously 2020 that year we did virtual, just everything on Zoom. But it's yeah, it's a wonderful facility, and we did a obviously barbell course there with Phil Scarito.
Yep.
And it's amazing. I realize I'm talking more about your facility than you. We will talk about you. Obviously, don't worry, JD. But I will say one of the best gyms I've ever walked into. It's just super clean, super organized, and it's a toy store. I mean, everything you need in there and more is in there. Plenty of barbells, racks. You've got plenty of benches. There's nothing is in there that's wasting space. It's solid equipment. You spent the money and got really good quality. The stuff's gonna last forever. So let me stop hyping your facility up. Let's talk about you. Everyone, welcome Coach JD, also AKA Justin. How you doing, man?
Good, doing pretty good here. Yeah, I go by JD. Name's Justin, but JD or as the name of my facility's BearFit. I grew up. That was my nickname growing up in school and sports and stuff like that. So that's where the name kind of came from. Glad to be on the show.
I like that. Yeah, it's great to have you, man. And I mean, your logo is just badass, dude. I love it. I mean, bears are pretty formidable. They're pretty dangerous, and pound for pound, pretty gosh darn strong.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
Also, funny enough, we're also like very chill unless agitated. Hence the whole nickname of don't poke the bear. We don't really ever bother anybody or do anything until you come into us and bother us, and then you know how that goes. So
great. No, that's
yeah.
a great philosophy. I love that. I love that there's some more depth into that
Mm-hmm.
philosophy. That's fantastic. And yeah, and let's be honest, when you see a bear, like you kind of just back up and you're like, I'm gonna let you do your thing, man. If you're smart at least.
Right,
Um,
yeah.
my in-laws have they have a dachshund, and that dog, I swear to God, would charge a grizzly bear if he saw one. He will pick a fight with anybody. He just that Napoleon complex, and
Mm-hmm.
I swear to God, in his mind, he is like a 300-pound pit bull,
Right,
massive,
all jacked up.
genetic hybrid. You know what I mean? He's like, he would. I swear he would charge a T-Rex if he saw one. It's really funny. And a lot of times the other big dogs are just like, whatever, man, just let you kind of, just let you run your mouth and do your thing. So
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I was just visiting my cousins last weekend and they have 2 corgis, and we were at a football game and they allow everybody can bring whatever dogs they want,
yeah,
and there was a couple of labs and like even like a bull mastiff and a Great Dane and a Bernese Mountain Dog, and all those dogs just lying on the ground, not bothered. The 2 little corgis running around yapping their head off, and there was a little beagle yapping his head off, and the big dogs just kind of like turn their head and look at him and are like, "You for real, bro? Like, just go over there and calm down. Like I don't need to be bothered by this."
yeah, they have that quiet confidence, and I think that's really. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think that's something that comes with training as well. Training, getting bigger, stronger, faster, all that good stuff. You develop that more quiet confidence, and I can definitely speak to that as a former skinny kid who got the shit kicked out of him in school. I was bullied a
Mhm.
lot, and in many ways, I'm grateful for that because that's what motivated me to get into the gym and get stronger. And I was able to kind of channel that anger and frustration into something positive, and obviously, it became my career. So it's
Absolutely.
I feel like we're in many ways we look back on our challenges and we're blessed in many ways.
Hmm.
So I think that's just a cool way to look at it. But yeah, man, let's dig into you a little bit. If you just want to give me what is the JD origin story?
Yeah, so I guess as succinctly as I can put it is, I always played sports growing up from a very young age. I mean, I always tell people like probably the first sport I ever learned how to do was ski because everybody in my family skied. My whole family lived up near Sunday River in Maine. Pretty much it was like the winter that I stood up for the first time. They put me on a
Oh,
pair of skis. I was 2 years old. It was like, hey,
oh,
you can stand, you can ski. Good, we'll figure this out. Okay. Um, from there, my dad was a really good athlete. My uncle was a really good athlete. They still hold some state records up in Maine and stuff like that. And my grandfather was a coach, and so I think it just came. Sports as general came natural to me. They're pretty much very rarely has there been a sport that I've tried that I wasn't like capable of figuring out or picking up very quickly.
yeah,
Um, I actually don't want to say I was always a big kid. It took a little bit of time until probably like I hit middle school and I hit like a couple growth spurts and then I became like, the second or third biggest kid in the school. Up until then, I was not small, but not maybe as physically imposing as I am now or was in high school. So like growing up, but I was always too big, which is, I always find this is, I always say is the funniest part of the story. The number one sport I ever wanted to play was football.
yeah.
But in Wakefield, like Matt Wakefield, where I live and grew up, um, they have Pop Warner, and there's weight limits based on your age. So even
That's
though I wasn't hugely massive, I was always like 30 or 40 pounds heavier than the weight limit for my age group. And they're like,
oh,
hey, you're in third grade, you can play with the seventh graders. And my mom was like, yeah, well, we're not doing that, like. So growing up, I had to play soccer, which I'm like, okay, so there's a sport where you can make 10, 20, $30 million a year to hit people for being large, strong, and athletic. And then there's this other sport where you're not allowed to touch anybody because if you sneeze on them, they pretend like they're injured. Whatever.
yeah,
But they're like, hey, you can do that and run around and play whatever you want. I'm like, okay, well, I ended up being like on the travel A team for soccer because I was still a good athlete. And I played basketball and baseball because that's just kind of what you did as a younger athlete. I didn't really know about other sports. So I
yeah,
just kind of like bid my time and did those things. And I skied and played sports or whatever until high school. And then basically waited until high school. And it was funny because there was like me and probably three or four other kids. We were all about the same size. And we always told the kids that play at Pop Warner, like, haha, you guys don't play. Like, wait till we get to high school. Like, we're already played for 10 years. We're going to be so much better than you. You don't have any skills. And it's like, yeah, bro, you guys all weigh 150 pounds. I'm like, we're walking in as freshmen and 14 years old, being 6 feet tall, weighing 240. I'm like, I don't really need a skill set or have any skills to beat you. Like, it's not going to be a fair.
yeah.
um, so that turned into, yeah, freshman year was football, basketball, and baseball. I ended up getting hurt during freshman year, so I ended up not playing basketball again after that. Tore my hamstring, didn't play. I played baseball freshman year, didn't have a good coach, didn't have a good experience. After that, I kept playing football. Ended up blowing out my knee my sophomore year, so then that's why I quit basketball. I didn't do anything. I had knee surgery, and then outdoors, instead of playing baseball, I joined the track and field team.
Oh,
I
nice.
was a pitcher and first baseman in baseball. They were like, "Hey, you have a pretty good arm. We've seen you throw. Why don't you throw the jab?" First day of practice, like literally threw far enough standing in place to qualify for states as a sophomore, like on a one step with the jab.
Oh,
So the coach was like, "Holy crap, that's wild!" And I'm like, "I have no idea what I'm doing, but I have a pretty good arm." I can also add to that story that I have a long term elbow injury from throwing the jab because my coach back then was like, "Hey, you were a pitcher in baseball. Yeah, you just pick this thing up. You just throw it the same." I can confirm after 6 years of throwing it, you do
oh
not throw
no.
the javelin how you throw a baseball unless you want to have Tommy John surgery for sure. So it got to the point where I literally couldn't hold it or throw it anymore, so bad that it hurt. So I ended up stopping that, but I picked up shot put and discus, and that went very well for me. So those are all the sports that led to that. I'm not going to say highly recruited. I wasn't the best football player of all time when I was in high school, but I was very good as a 6'2", 285-pound center. I got recruited by places in New England, like most people would know. Like, there's still one, or still some of them are still one. I call them one double A because that's what they were when I was in high school. I think it's uh, FCS now or whatever. It's sub,
Yeah,
sub
yeah,
whatever. It's the UNH. UMass Amherst is now Division 1, but they weren't back then.
correct. Yeah.
University of Rhode Island. I was never quite big enough to go to the bigger schools. I went to some of the camps, but they would be like, "Sorry, son, you're not 6'3", 6'4", you're not 315 pounds. You're only 6'2", 290." Which every person around would be like, "Jesus," like they see me now, like, "Oh, you're a big guy," and I'm like, "Well, no, I could introduce you to some big guys. I'm just in the
Relative.
world
Yeah.
that I live in. I go, I'm just an average guy." Compared to the average people, I'm a very large guy, but I'm an average guy compared to the large, as like you go around strongman competitions and all these other things and big track and
Oh,
field meets. And,
get
these
it.
guys are, 6'8", 400 pounds, whatever. No, so they're just walking monsters, I say.
Oh,
But,
absolutely.
yeah. So what ended up happening was, I blew my knee out 3 times in high school, had a couple surgeries,
Yeah.
and I got recruited to play sports in college. I had to redshirt my freshman year, didn't even get to play. And I had stayed local. I chose to go to UMass Lowell my freshman year, so I could still see the same doctor, still see the same rehab specialist, whatever, while I was redshirting. That made it easier for me. And then I was going to try to play a year and then transfer out to one of the other schools I had talked to. Most of them seemed pretty understanding with the fact that I had to have knee surgery and not, I didn't want to go up to like nowhere in Maine where I didn't know
No
the
big
doctor, I
deal.
didn't know anything or whatever, you know what I mean? So that was the year that UMass Lowell actually cut their football program while I was there as a freshman.
Oh,
So I never even got to play, never even got to spring practice, never did anything. So I was basically only there to try to play football to transfer, back to one of the other schools. And unfortunately, back then it wasn't like transfer portal like it is today for the kids.
yeah.
The only way that they allowed you to even leave the school to go somewhere else to play was if another coach on the team had got a coaching job somewhere else, and only one coach on our team got a job. And it ended up being like in a very small school here called Curry College on the South Shore. And so I'd be like, probably like 15 of us went down there and joined the team. And that's actually, I don't know, people that are local to the Massachusetts area might know, like Steve Nelson, that played for the Patriots, was the head coach at the time. So that was a pretty cool
Oh, yeah.
experience. Unfortunately for me, even after the surgeries and rehab, my knee was so junked that I made it through 3 weeks of practice. And one day I just like rolled out of bed and my knee gave out again.
Oh,
So I just like, at that point, I was like, hey, man, like I'm 19 years old, like just about to turn 20. I'm like, I'm already having problems like walking, like everything never felt like it just after all the surgeries and stuff, like it just never felt right, even at that time. So I just said, well, same reason. I'm only here to play football to see if I can go somewhere else. And I hadn't really chosen a career path at that time or whatever. So I just like was like, school hadn't even started. And I just said, I just don't think it's for me. Like I never wanted to go to that school. Not that it's a bad school or whatever or anything. It just wasn't what I wanted to do or where I wanted to be. I was just there to be there to get some football like skills under my belt or whatever at the college
yeah.
level. So I ended up leaving that and just came home and just like got a job, just got a regular job, like working around town. I helped my stepfather out, had a construction company back then. I did a couple other odd jobs, worked security, and did some other stuff, and just put some money in the bank and pay some bills, and just try to figure out what I was going to do with my life. My sister at that time was in middle school, and my old football coach was actually her gym teacher.
Oh,
And
nice.
my freshman football coach from high school was a state trooper, and he had just got stationed from Danvers out to Devens, Mass, which is in the middle of Massachusetts. So like 1 week before the season started, he had to quit. And like my sister happened to be in class and was like, the my old coach asked my sister like, "Hey, I heard JD had to drop out of school. He's not doing anything right now. Like, is there any chance like maybe he'd want to come down and be like the freshman football coach?" So there I was, 20 years old, just like hanging around doing nothing. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. Like, I can't play football anymore. My knee's so banged up. But I was like, hey, maybe I can at least be around it. Maybe I can help some of these younger kids and whatever. And
Really?
so I jumped on the opportunity. I went down there and started coaching. So I started coaching at 20 on the football team. And, I was a pretty good track and field athlete. And like when I was at UMass Lowell, when I was redshirting, I would actually go down and watch their track practices. And I was learning from like their throws coach. And I helped a friend of mine like the winter before, like with a bunch of stuff we had never learned when I was in high school because we really didn't have a coach. We pretty much just showed up and we were bigger, stronger, and faster than the other kids and had no clue what we were doing throwing wise. But if you're bigger and stronger and fast enough in high school, you can throw the thing pretty far even without any technical skills, so to speak. So yeah, we helped them out, and then they ended up hiring me as an assistant track and field coach for indoor and outdoor track, doing all the throwing events. So I did that from like 2004 to 2018. Um, but that kind of segues into when I was coaching. Obviously, I dropped out of school. I was bumming around, just working random odd jobs just to put some money in the bank. So wasn't even going to school yet. So just being a broke 20-year-old kid to getting a couple $1,000 stipend, you know, I started lifting at the high school, and training at the high school gym. And a lot of kids on the team like would come in and be like, "Jesus, coach, you're a pretty strong guy, huh? Like, you've been after this for a while." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I just love this stuff." And they're like, "Well, any chance we could train with you?" Like, obviously, I'm like, "Well,
Oh,
obviously,
nice.
I'm coaching you guys in sport, so I want you guys to be big and strong because it's going to help me as a coach look good. If you guys are big and strong, we're going to beat some people." Um, So I did that for I did that for pretty much the entire time I was coaching, obviously. But they were the ones that pretty much gave me the idea. They were like, "Hey, well, while you're doing this, you're pretty good at this. We know you're just taking some classes at a local community college. Like, maybe you should think about going to school for this or getting certified in this and doing this because back then, the only program that really existed was most people would know is Body by Boyle, Mike Boyle strength and
Yep.
conditioning kind of thing. And I mean, I trained there when I was in high school. My dad actually went to college with him and stuff, and that was it. So there was really no programs or offerings for anybody. So if you went there, you went there, and if you didn't, it was you went to the local, Globo gym, Gold's gym, whatever, and did bodybuilding stuff, which, as you know, or being an athlete or anybody knows, that's not necessarily how you want to train to be, performance minded for sports. It's not the same. Some of those
Yeah.
things do help, but it's at a 10% versus how you would train to be a good athlete is not the same thing, So that segued into me, ended up going to still being able to stay coaching. I just basically searched colleges within an area where I could uh, commute to and still coach that had programs, exercise science, exercise physiology, or whatever that worked out. And it was pretty much it was BU, and I was like, I'm not going to Boston, or Northeast, and I'm like, I'm not going to Boston. There was Endicott, and then there was Salem State, and at the time I was like, so I pretty much ended up having to choose between Endicott and Salem State, and I was like, well, I can't play football. It wouldn't be cool if I could play sports, and Salem State back then still had a track and field team. So I was like, hey, maybe I can go to Salem State. I can go for, exercise science. And I did track and field while I was there. So I got to have some fun there too,
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. I ended up graduating. I ended up interning and working at Boyle's just because, like I said, it was the only place to gain some experience.
Yeah.
Did that for a year. And then me and one of the other coaches at our high school ended up starting our own summer camp out of the high school, training athletes. We started with 40 or 50 kids. For 3 or 4 years, we worked together, and me and him just kind of, for lack of a better term, butted heads. We didn't see anything anyway on the same mind. Not to say he had a very old school mentality. He was 20 years older than me, and I don't want to say new school mentality, but I was more of in the strength conditioning field. I challenged the status quo. I'm not just going to do something just because we the worst thing you can ever say to me is oh, this is what we do because this is what we've always done. That's the most hated quote I have my entire life. That's just, I go, we're talking about a scientific field where everything is about experimentation and seeing if something works, something sticks, changing one parameter or not. I go, if you literally just did the same thing for your entire life, that's just foolish to me, so I don't understand that, I've tried every
Yes.
variation, every training system, everything you can do. And I've probably taken one or two things from all of them because I've learned something that's valuable. I do
Yep.
agree that many of the very, very basic things matter the most, but learning different ways to implement them and change them and, mutate them based on whatever sport you play or whatever you do also matters, you
Oh,
know?
couldn't agree.
So just being pigeonholed into hey, I learned this in 1993 and this is what I'm still doing in 2024. And I've literally never changed anything. That's kind of, I'm take your head out of your bum, man, because that's just not cool. So a friend of mine I went to college with had started his own facility over in North Reading, which was a little bit of the drive. But it was funny because when I said I was going to split from the guy and go on my own, he's like, well, good luck to you. I don't really think that's going to work out good for you. And I kind of laughed and I go, okay, well, we have 50 kids in the summer program. I go, let's just see how many come and join me and how many stay with you. And 45 out of the 50 came and joined me over there, even though they had to drive. So I go, I think more of them understood the process of let's just not do the things we've been doing. There's better ways to do things. And we're ready to go do some of those things. And
Yeah.
many of those from that original group, you're talking, this was in 2012, 2013. So 12, 12 years ago, about 50% of them are still members at my gym currently that I still write programs for that train on their own.
Dude, that's awesome. I
So, I mean,
love
you've actually probably met some of them. They're all the 20, 25-year-old kids. So I was
that.
coaching them all in high school. They still all come and they're still all members.
Dude, I just got chills from that. That's really cool, man. Talk about
So
long-term relationships. That's
right.
great.
So building that long-term relationship. So, pretty much coming out, trying to get into your own facility like I have now where you've been, is not easy, and I've done it all on my own, So I started by working at my friend's facility there. I was there for 2 years. We ran the summer programs. Didn't really get to do much the rest of the year just because I didn't have a facility. And occasionally we'd run some programs and have, 5 or 10 kids or whatever. And then I got lucky enough that a girl that I had coached actually opened a CrossFit gym in Wakefield, 2 miles from the high school. and they had like a basically was way too small for us, but they had like a 1,000 square foot garage in the back of the building, and they basically let me sublease it out 1,000 square feet. So like a third of the size of what I have in the facility now.
Yes.
Um, and on I was like, I had a few $1,000s saved up, and I just bought the minimum. I bought a set of dumbbells. I bought like a
Yep.
4 section CrossFit rig and whatever small amount we could just fit in there.
That's it,
And
man.
and at that time, like I had been training the volleyball team, the field hockey team, the football team, the baseball team, the boys and girls hockey teams. Like I was like pumping 100 to 150 athletes out of there every summer. And we were crushing it, and I loved it honestly. And middle school kids and whatever. That allowed me just the opportunity for like 4 years basically to save up as much money as I possibly could. And then unfortunately, some like development company bought the building out from the original landlord,
Oh
and
yeah.
their original lease had said no subleases. But the original landlord basically told them he didn't care. He said, as long as I get my rent every month, it's cool. The
Okay.
second the new company bought it out, they read the lease and they were like, you got to go.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, screw it. I'm like, I got 2 months. I looked everywhere in Wakefield because all my business was in Wakefield because I coached in Wakefield. I was still coaching at the time in Wakefield. But unfortunately, there was nothing available. So I ended up having to like get it. I went into a place in Peabody, and which is where I got all the equipment that I have. It was an awesome place, huge space, like 6,000 square feet, and I got a pretty good deal on it. Unfortunately, like 75% of the kids I trained don't drive, and parents weren't like coming out at 6 o'clock at night after because I was still coaching at the time. So
Yeah.
like, hey, they're getting out of school, they're getting out of work at 5. They didn't want to drive 30 more minutes to Peabody in traffic after that, and that really so my
Which
business took a big stage dive at that time,
get it.
and I
Yeah.
wasn't really training any adults at that time. I was like only coaching, and pretty much it was like 90% athletes and like 10% adults, and the adults that came were just like my friends that trained with me, basically. Like I ran
Hey,
one group of adult friends. Um, which lasted about like 8 or 9 months, which was just a good experience to just say like, hey, if you really think that you're just going to show up somewhere, put some money up, and put a good facility up, because that facility was probably even better than the one I have now. But if you're in a place where nobody knows you and nobody knows anything, like it's very difficult to just go from zero to whatever and make it work. So
oh, yeah.
unless you come in with a franchise name, then maybe that's possible. But if you're trying
Exactly.
to do it on your own, then that's a totally different story. So I was there for like 9 or 10 months, and then luckily the place that I'm in now I was actually in the unit next door to start. Um, that had opened up, and a friend of mine worked in real estate in Wakefield, and just called me. Was like, hey, if there's any chance you can get out of your lease up there in Peabody, like let me know, and like I can get you into this place literally like next week. I like called the owner up and I was like, hey, bro, I just want to let you know like it's not working here. Like I can pay you the last like month or two like on the lease or whatever, but I go if I stay here, it's just going to go under. This is 2018, and I was literally at like my wits end that I was like,
Yeah.
maybe I'm just going to have to go down a different career path, and things aren't going to work out, and I don't know what's going to happen, but like blessing from above or whatever. Like this place opened up. He let me pay out 1 month, like one last month's like rent out in Peabody. I closed up shop, and then I moved into the place over here in Wakefield, and we've been like I said, we were in the unit next door, but now like we moved into the unit we're in now, just because the other side at first had a very huge like 2-story uh, like office whatever space utilized, and it just took up so much space at the time. Like I just
Yeah.
was unusable space, so I didn't really like. The second he gave me the opportunity to move next door, there was just the open space, versus having that. The
No
other one
brainer.
took up 800 square feet, and I was like, it's not a place that I need to be losing 800 square feet. You know what I mean? Like, well, the stuff I had, I was like,
Exactly.
we barely, as you've been in there, if anybody's ever been in the facility, like we're barely making it fit as it is. Like there's a lot of toys that I like, and there's a lot of things I want to use, and a lot of ways to help people, and there's even more ways that I'm trying to, we're trying to do a refurbish and trying to move some things around to try to even fit a couple more things in to make it even better, because that's always like I'm not a as I said before, doing things the way you've always done them is not how I like to do things. I'm not a very stagnant person. I'm always looking for, not to say it a way to make anything better, but just a way for things to function better, to offer more things to more people to help them. But yeah, so the craziest part of this whole story is I went into business for myself in December of 2015. And as Demarco had mentioned, I had some pretty serious health issues. Um, I had found out in August of 2016, I got hospitalized. And that's when I found out I had 2 different genetic heart diseases. And I literally pretty much died on the table that day, so to speak. I was in the hospital for like 8 or 9 days just to get me stable. This was up in Maine. My heart rate was like 125, 130, just lying in bed. My blood pressure got as high as like 250 over 180. Like they literally thought I was going to have an
Ah,
aneurysm and die. I
oh
went,
man.
yeah, so I went completely septic because I actually had a blood infection in my heart from the heart disease that I had, which had gone like basically unchecked to that point in my life.
Damn.
Unfortunately, it's the same genetic stuff that my grandfather had and another grandfather, like on both sides of my family, have it. I have I have two different ones, cardiomyopathy, and it's called like a brittle artery disease and this other stuff that doesn't allow your arteries to work correctly. And I basically got both of them. But they had always said I was a very good athlete. I played sports. I never had issues. I lifted well. I ran whatever you wanted to do. I was capable of doing it. So they always checked me and said, "Oh, it's fine, this and that. Nothing was bad until it literally hit the fan, and it was as bad as it could humanly possibly get."
Yeah.
Uh, and that started in 2016, and then things were pretty good for a year, and things balanced out. But then, like in 2018, when I moved, I ended up having to have another heart surgery and another corrective heart surgery in 2019, another corrective heart surgery in 2020. Like all in
Yeah.
all, I've had 5 corrective heart surgeries. I have 7 stents in all 7 arteries. Um, my heart function at the time, that first time, was as low as 12%. They
Oh my
told
God.
me they're literally lying on the table at 10%. You die because your heart doesn't pump enough blood to supply oxygen to your organs to function correctly.
Holy
And I don't know, people understand how the heart works or whatever. So 12% obviously sounds very bad, which it is terribly bad. And the other part was my ejection fraction, which is how hard your heart can pump the blood out.
hmm
65% is basically a perfect score. Mine was at like 19%. So I had 12% heart function, 19% ejection fraction.
Oh my
Went
God.
through all the surgeries, did everything, whatever. Ended up getting myself stable. I had very bad kidney and liver issues with it because of some of the medications, and like I gained a whole ton of weight, and I would be in and out of the hospital like 5 or 6 times a year, and put me on like uh, liquid IV protocols, trying to strip the fluid out. Because like literally, if you listen to my heart and lungs, it would basically sound like I was drowning underwater while just be sitting there in a chair.
Oh man.
But like they could strip 20 pounds of fluid off, and then they'd have to send me home because it was doing damage to my kidneys. And then 3 weeks later, I'd be up 25 pounds. So it didn't matter. So it was just like a escalating scale because nothing in my internal system was working correctly. So, when this all started, I was like a 320-pound power lifter with almost a 700-pound squat, almost a 500-pound bench, and almost a 700-pound deadlift. And I felt really good and things were going well. As funny as it was, the last time I lifted was like literally the Friday before I got hospitalized. And I had deadlifted like 625 for two, and I felt awesome. And then Sunday, I pretty much died. So I don't know if that caused it, but I doubt it because I think this was a long term thing that was building up, um, which stinks. But they were able to do everything. They got my heart stable. They ended up. So I work at Tufts, where I've had people in my family have actually had other surgeries. One of my like aunts through marriage had a heart replacement surgery. I work with the same exact team. She lived 20 years after her heart replacement surgery.
Oh, that's great.
So it's a very good place. Obviously, I'm blessed that I live so close to Boston because probably the best heart surgeons and doctors in the world pretty much are in. But like people fly, I always say sheiks from Saudi Arabia fly to Boston to have heart surgery when they need it. So
Absolutely.
that probably tells you, you know, maybe I'm just meant to be here and stay here because this is what's keeping me alive. So
Right.
blessed to have that. But yeah, so they were able to get me stabilized, and then basically they did like a weight loss surgery for me because they've had success with people who have the same issue as me, being able to get all the fluid off in a very great, like very expedited amount of time, which basically like saved my life, so to speak.
Oh yeah.
Because I was on like like I said, I was on like 300 milligrams of a fluid pill a day, and my weight could still fluctuate anywhere from 5 to 15 pounds on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the general person's going to say, oh, that's, I go, if you really think you can gain 15 pounds by eating food in a day, even Joey Chestnut, when he eats 100 hot dogs on the 4th of July, isn't gaining
Yeah.
15 pounds. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
I go, the amount of calories and food you'd have to consume would kill you. You would literally burst at the seams to gain 15
Oh, it'd
pounds.
be like that really screwed up scene in Seven.
Right. You know what I'm saying? Right. Gluttony. You know what I'm saying? Like they're literally force
Yeah.
feeding you through a tube to a point where, your stomach would rupture. You'd bleed from the inside out. Right. It's, like I always say, it's like the chick in Willy Wonka when she eats the wrong thing, like turns into the purple, but
Yeah.
actually blow up pretty much, not just get rolled
Right.
out. Yeah. So, people understand. They go, yeah. And I go, it's like, so my highest weight ended up getting all the way up to like 465 pounds. It was
Wow.
through no fault of my own. Like I was doing the
Right.
right things and eat. I go like people always like, well, yeah. I go, I eat the same exact way now as I ate then. I train the same way now as I trained before. And I go now, like just on Tuesday, I just had my yearly physical, and I'm all the way down to 283 pounds. I take no fluid medications. I was on like 15 medications for like my heart and liver and all these other things, and I'm down to like four.
That's
So
awesome.
like and my heart function is from 12% is now at 90%, and my ejection fraction went from 18% to 60%.
Fuck yeah. That's
And to clarify that, they pretty much told me their goal, even after all the heart surgeries and the weight loss surgery, was to get my ejection fraction to above 40% and get my heart function above 60%. If I did both of those things, I would basically be able to live my life how I wanted and that I would be good. So to say that I went as high as 90% and 60%, it's basically like I'm walking around almost like nothing had ever happened and I completely reversed everything that's ever occurred up to that point in my life.
that's incredible, man.
Which at least they say is basically they've never seen numbers go that high after the amount of things that I had to go through.
Yeah.
Almost like a, I don't, whatever you want to say, miracles or whatever, but basically they just said, we've never seen it in all the years that we've worked here. No one has ever made a recovery like that. So I
That's
always say someone somewhere is looking down to make sure that I probably have more to do in my life. And I always say, hey, I was put here to just help people, and that's why I love doing what I do. And I spread the word to try to get as many people in as we can to keep it going. But so that's the part of the health history that went there. That's where I am now. I'm back to lifting, training 4 days a week. I do all my stuff. Everything feels good. Basically, I had to take almost like 5 years off, which unfortunately really sets you back in the game of being strong, which
oh,
stinks because it took me like, almost 20 years to get to where I was.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
then, it probably didn't even take all 5 years to go as low as I did. It probably took the first 2 years basically to go to almost nothing. So, um, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. And now I'm going to build it back and I'll be back. I don't know if I'll ever be as strong as I was at 30 because I was pretty good. And as you get older, it's not quite as easy, but I'm going to give it hell. I can tell you that for sure. But,
Love that, man. Yeah.
so even with all that health and everything that went on that entire time, like I said, I started the business in 2015, the first surgery in 2016. I had to move the business in 2018, had a heart surgery in 2018. Ended up moving the business again at the end of 2018 to where it is now. Had another heart surgery in 2019. Had another heart surgery in 2020. Had another heart surgery in 2021. Had the weight loss surgery in 2022. And here we are in 2024. We even went through COVID and all that stuff. And the gym's still open and operational. And it's, to me right now, like, yeah, it's been 6 years since I started here. But like, basically, it's been since last year since I've actually been what I would consider for the first point in my life, quote unquote, healthy, since basically 2016, that, we're actually growing the gym now how I would have wanted it to grow from 2018 when I first
Yeah.
got there. So like I said, I don't want to say it was like not 5 years in the wash, but it was basically like 5 years of just treading water and holding steady and just making sure that the door stayed open. And
Absolutely.
now I'm at the point where I'm healthy enough to actually be there training. I train the groups, I do whatever I can do personal training, like all this stuff I couldn't even do 2 years ago.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
occasionally I would have a surgery and my doctor would let me show up and sit in a chair, and talk to people, which I think you remember a couple of times, like even like when you held the event, like, you're going
Absolutely.
to participate in this and that. And I'm like, hey, man, I would love to. However, I go, the best I can offer is to like sit in my office and just not die. you know,
Yeah. Which is
yeah,
which is good. I'm glad you
which
did
is
that.
which was good. And I always say to people jokingly, like, hey, yeah, that's good. Stay alive. That's cool. So yeah, but I mean, that basically was it. So I'm very thankful, to everybody over the years that did support me, has supported me, has come. Some have gone, some have stayed. Some moved on, some have sent. 90% of the business that we've done is all through word of mouth and referral. I've really never marketed or pushed anything like that. It's basically just been people that have come, people that have enjoyed it, have shared that with somebody else, and they've come and they've enjoyed it, and they've shared it with somebody else, and it's basically just grown, organically like that. And as I mentioned at first, it was probably like 90% athletes and 10% adults,
Mhm.
and now it's like 90% adults and 10% athletes.
Yeah.
So it's basically been a huge coin flip, and that really started around like COVID time, pretty much. Like that was the last year, and granted, I wasn't very healthy, so that probably didn't help the cause, but that was like the last year that athletes really came as teams and groups to train. And that whole like, like not being in school and doing this or having seasons, I think really just kind of put a kibosh on everything, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And like once it stopped, and then it just kind of like never restarted ever again. And I've had some athletes come in for like personal training and stuff like that, but never like the teams or groups or anything anymore. So,
Do you
which
miss
is
it?
okay. I do miss it to some degree. I would say now that I'm a little older, like not having to run around after a bunch of 15 or 16-year-olds and telling them to like stay in line and not do this and not do that. It's not such
Yeah.
a terrible thing, but uh, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. And I would say, doing like the small groups, or doing like one-on-one, or, like two or three of the athletes at a time, they seem to be obviously the ones who come at that point are extremely dedicated to what they're doing and getting better. So they're
Yep.
far more engaged. When it used to be the entire team, it would be like, the booster club would pay for the team to come, and it'd be 20 kids to show up. You know, 10 of the kids, 12 of the kids on the team were actually very dedicated. They cared how well they did, how well the team did. And the other 8 kids were just like goofing off and not doing anything anyways. And it's kind of like, it's my mentality. I never understood that. I'm like, you're here to play sports. Somebody paid for you, like whatever. Like they put the money on the line for you to get better at sport, or you're playing a sport. I go, why would you not want to show up and put your best foot forward to become better for yourself and your teammates? Like, to me, you're just a bad teammate. And I just never, I don't understand. Like my mentality, I can never wrap my head around it. So anybody who was like that, I just, like didn't jive. So I'm happier now doing what I'm doing, I would say, but I definitely do miss that like team camaraderie aspect. But I'm also very thankful to have like the group training, the adult group training that I do, because we've created
Okay.
that kind of foundation with training the adult groups. And yeah, I would even like to get doing more of that if possible, and growing that side of the business even more so than I've grown it now. Because I definitely like that, and I definitely think I could help more people as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, group training is such a it's such a win-win for everybody. You're able to serve, multiple people at once. The price point for the client, typically is lower,
Yep.
which makes it more affordable for them. Which that's one of the things I love about you and your business is you could charge a lot more, but you don't.
Hmm.
I respect. I feel like you still have held on to that kind of blue collar mindset, which I love.
Yeah.
But that's I think that's the reason we vibe. But yeah, and then obviously overall your income will definitely go up too. You're going to make more per hour, so
Yeah.
it's a solid win. So that's great. Yeah, 2015 to 16-year-olds. That sounds intense, man. I think at most, I mean, we did the Fitness for Good event, and we had maybe 20 to 30 people the first year, but that was all adults. It was not
Right.
teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's different. Like I said, and a lot of the kids I know, because even if like it was a different sport, like I didn't coach the hockey team or whatever, or field hockey or whatever, but like most of those kids would have crossed over. Like maybe a kid on the hockey team was a captain on the football team, or a girl on
Yeah,
the field hockey team was a girl that I coached in track and field or something. So there was always like some combination of like how those teams came to be training with me, is because like maybe I had just trained one of the girls on the team in a different sport, and then they showed up to that other sport, and all of a sudden they were kicking all the other girls or boys, kicking their butt up and down the field. And they're like, "What the heck are you doing? What have you been doing?" Like, "Oh, well, I joined winter and spring track and field with Coach Barry, and now I'm 3 times as strong and I'm twice as fast as everybody else." And then the rest of the team was like, "Well, geez, we need to go there too." So,
it,
and then like those people that I had already trained, like held the other kids on the team more accountable, because they
absolutely.
knew like what I expected as the standard. So they really, like, even the kids that would kind of goof off, like they wouldn't let them goof off. Like most
Yeah.
of the time, I wouldn't even have to handle it. They would go over and handle it.
Oh, that's the
Or
best.
like they would leave a session, and like they would talk to them, and like sometimes like the younger kids, like if it was a kid who maybe didn't start or wasn't helping on the team or wasn't doing good, like they weren't even invited back to train with the team. And like the captains would tell the coach, like, "Hey, this kid can't come because all he wants to do is goof off, and he's doing it for the rest of us."
That's
You know?
that's respect at the highest level because that's respect for you as a person, as a professional, and your brand and
Yep.
the culture that you have created
Yep.
over the decades of your time in the game. So that's when you have your own athletes checking the other guys.
Right.
That's when you know you've done it. Are you familiar with Simon Sinek?
I've heard the name before. Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote the book The Power of Why. He also wrote, I think, Leaders Eat Last and a couple of other books. He talks about that, about like you can only accomplish so much if it's just you, the dictator calling
Yep.
all of the shots. When you empower, the people that you're coaching and they feel empowered and they're learning, they're taking your values and they're passing them down to the next generation. I mean, that's that's like a virus, but in a good way. It's like
Very
spreading.
good. Yeah, yeah,
That's just
spreading. Yeah,
that's trickle down. That's trickle down value sharing. I can't or ripple effect. Ripple effect is a better
ripple
way.
effect. Yeah, yeah. I would
Um,
say yeah, it's like the what's like the Reaganomics. You know what I mean? Trickle down
exactly.
economics or something. You know,
Yeah.
whatever they used to say. Not that way because there's no money exchange. But I always used to
Exactly.
say like my gold standard as a coach for myself was especially in track and field or even like football. Like I coached the offense, defensive line was if by the time somebody became a senior, if I had done my job well enough during their first 3 years, by the time they were a senior, they could take a new freshman aside or a sophomore aside and they could coach them through at least the very minimal, you know, top 10 basic steps of what they needed to learn so that I could focus sometimes on like the higher level competitors or whatever. Not that I didn't give anybody the same amount of attention, but I knew that I had coached them and taught them well enough in their technique and their ability to explain the technique so that they had a strong understanding themselves. If
Yep.
they could then take that information and go explain it exactly how I would to somebody else at the same exact time. You know, so even like the kids that I've, like I said, that train in my gym that have been coming for 10, 12, 15 years, some of them, you know, that I've coached or whatever, you know, I write programs and something and like they can literally go into the gym and like somebody else can be there working out and they can help them with the workout because I've taught them the basics of it. Like there's more people there that probably could coach at the same level I do because of everything I've taught them over 5 or 10 years than people that I've seen that have gone to college that have no clue because they've never worked with anybody or done anything, you know? So it's like, it makes me feel good that I know like, hey, I'm like, hey, can you go help them with this? I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And they go do exactly like they explain it and do it exactly how I would do it and explain it. Not saying that they have to do it exactly how I would do it, but
Oh yeah,
at least
exactly.
they've learned the skill set to understand like how to get this information to somebody in a discernible manner that they can actually learn and do it themselves as well, you know?
Absolutely. And just like I do, man, that the communication is such a critical factor. I know people like communication is key. It's this very hackneyed phrase particularly on social media, but it's true. It's one thing for you and I to sit here and we know, I mean, I will say you know the squat, bench, and deadlift a lot more than I do. I
Yeah.
understand the mechanics, put up some decent numbers for a guy my size. But your numbers are very impressive.
Mhm.
So, but that being said, you and I can say, "Oh yeah, I know how to deadlift. I know how to get into position. I know how to take the slack out of the bar, take the breath, breathe, brace, lift. Create the belt,
Yep.
form the cylinder. All those cues that we know. Grip the ground, rip apart. I know all that. But if I can't teach the person in front of me how to do that, then you can't be an effective coach. You
Right.
know,
This is I say if you can't get that information to them, it's not the right job for you.
that's
It just
right.
means it just
Yeah,
means you should just be the trainer and you just go train yourself and have fun and enjoy it, which plenty obviously most people that's what they do. You know, not it takes and that's in any sport, doesn't really matter the technique involved or whatever. Like in coach like I said in coaching, football there's probably less technique than there is in like track and field and like throwing events, but it's like very minuscule things like you're talking about changing arm position 1 degree. You're talking about bringing your right foot under your hip 3 more inches versus 1 more inch to develop maximal power output. Like, you know, like you said in the deadlift, it's can somebody sumo? Can somebody conventional? How far do you stand when you sumo? Whatever. It's like hip structure is different. You know, I always jokingly say somebody walks into the gym and they're like, hey, how do you squat? And I go, hey, I can tell you how I squat, but unless you're me, it might not be the same for you. Have you had
bingo.
the same injuries and health history I've had? Like, have you had 5 knee surgeries? Have you had every ligament in your knee replaced? Like, do you have these limitations? Like, do you need to change the way you stand? I go, or are you perfectly fine? Or do you have a hip injury or low history of lower back? Whatever. I go, is your femur the same length as mine? You know what I mean? Like all these stupid things people don't think about. And I go, right, I go, yes, there is basic things in a squat we all probably should do correctly. But I go, maybe after those like 5 or 6 things off the top, everything else becomes individualized as to what doesn't hurt you and allows you to progress over time. You know, so it's like learning that for somebody, it's like, yeah, I can tell you, like, you probably shouldn't stand with your feet necessarily touching each other. And maybe you also should squat like in a full split. However, I've definitely seen people do both of those things and be successful, but I go, they're probably a major outlier as opposed to what a general population person should do. You know what I mean? And I go, like, I like low bar squatting because it's always felt good for me, which kind of makes it look like a semi good morning, semi squat. I've always had a very strong lower back. I go, now for a newcomer, I'm probably not going to say you probably don't want to do that if you haven't built up the strength in your lower back to handle it. You're probably going to cause more harm than good, But I go, somebody who's been doing it 5 or 10 years and it feels good for them and they've never had an issue, have at it. Do whatever you want. Especially if
Exactly.
you're, and I always say at the end of the day, especially if you're a power lifter, I go, at the end of the day, if you're not hurting yourself and you walk on the platform and you put up a bigger number, it's only about lifting a bigger number, so to beat the competition. So I go, and even then, sometimes you're probably okay with some of it being slightly painful if you win. That's the way you're basically trading. That's your trade off. Any pro athlete will tell you, like I always said, I go, yeah, I've torn my ACL twice, I've torn my LCL, I've torn my PCL, whatever, all in sports and football. But if somebody called me tomorrow and said, hey, the Patriots offensive line is terrible, which they are, and said, we need to sign you for Sunday to play a game, but we can guarantee you before the game's over, you're going to tear your ACL again. Would you do it? I mean, I would sign on the dotted line right now to play one game in the NFL, knowing that I'm going to tear my ACL. I don't care because that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? Like, I'll rehab that, fine, and I'll be fine. I've done it plenty of times. No big deal. But I go, no, I don't know a lot of other people that would sign that deal. I probably have a few friends that probably would agree with me and do that. But yeah,
And
few and
that's
far
the
between. The general person wouldn't.
No, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more, man. And that's where the conversation changes, right? And we can talk about this next. And I want to be respectful of your time, so please let me know
Oh
if
yeah,
you're,
no
if you
worries.
have.
Yeah, yeah, plenty of time.
Thanks, man. I try to keep these generally around an hour, but sometimes I just want to let the guest cook when
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
really.
You get vibe. We get vibe, and we let it go. So that's all
Right.
good.
Plus, this is all really cool stuff. But this is where you look at the kind of the two ends of the spectrum, right? You've got health and performance,
Yep.
and if you stretch it too far one direction, the other one will suffer, right?
Yep.
I hate to sound like a total fanboy. We use this example, but use Tom Brady for example. He talked about his training and his like pliability stuff. We can talk another day about all of that stuff. Now, I will say I do love that he popularized bands. I thought that was kind of cool. He kind
Yep.
of made people think about using bands, particularly in 2020 when all the
Hmm.
fucking gyms were shut down.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
you know, I'll just leave it at that, so I don't go on a
yeah, yeah,
rant. Uh,
yeah. Hey, I agree with you. Believe me. Oh yeah. And I mean the band stuff. I mean I love. Which I mean I've been. If you've obviously been to my gym, if you see the amount of bands I have, and people will
yeah,
tell you like, oh yeah, Tom Brady popularized it in 2018. I'm like, I mean, if you were training back with me in 2018, we were pushing sleds, we were using bands for everything, like high rep stuff, and I'm like, this stuff's not reinvented the wheel, man. I go, it's been around a while, and I go, people that have been
West Side
wildly
was doing it
successful
back
have
in the
used it, and
day.
I go, the general population may not have known about it, and because of him, it brought more awareness to it, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
which is always good. I always say, and that's like in any other like scheme or methods or whatever these people have. I go, most of these things that are good have been around since before I was born.
so true. It's a
So
revolving wheel. Yeah,
it's circular, and I go, maybe some things fell out of favor because people stopped using them and they're the newfangled this or that or whatever. But I go, man, if that stuff worked for 30 years back then in the 50s and 60s and 70s and nobody had any issues and there was less injuries, I go, maybe there's something to that. You know,
that's it.
I go, especially if you can find stuff like I always say, like I like stuff from like old school strongman stuff, like from the 1900s to 1950s, because I go, anybody who got really strong or did something really well before the advent of like any kind of anabolic steroids or whatever,
Exactly.
I
Yeah,
go, whatever the heck they were doing definitely had to work because
absolutely.
there was no shortcuts, no changes. You couldn't go to submaximal levels, and obviously there was outliers because some of them were very strong, but I go, that was just their genetic makeup to be at that level. You know what I mean? And nobody was going to catch them. It's the same even now because I go, even if every athlete had the same access to the same stuff, someone's always still going to be the best. Doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? I go, now
Oh,
the only difference is the level of what the best is significantly higher than it could have been previous to that. You know what I mean? But it doesn't. It all evens out anyways. You know what I mean? I go, if and none of that stuff had ever been invented, and the best squat that could ever happen would be 800 pounds, then you would see somebody squat 800 pounds and you would shit a brick. I go, well,
exactly.
now the stuff's been invented and they have squat suits and they have all this other stuff, and somebody squats 1,200 pounds in it. Whatever. I go, it's
Yeah,
all relative. I go, it's still the best guy squatting 1,200.
hundred
He
percent.
would be the best guy squatting 800. You just would never know that a 1,200 could exist or something. You know what I mean? That's the only difference.
And yeah, genetics. I mean, at the top 1% of the 1% of the game, genetics is obviously a huge factor. I'm 5'9", a buck 90 on a good
Right.
day.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I was a buck 35, in high
Yeah.
school when I was a cross country runner, and I also did track, but I was the skinnier guy that was running distance, and
Right,
uh,
right.
coach would throw me into the sprints every once in a while if one of my teammates was ineligible, academically ineligible. I think it happened
Yeah,
like
yeah.
two. One of my buddies was a 400-meter runner. He was a cheetah, man. It was amazing watching him run. But he couldn't run, so they put me in, and he's running like 50 seconds, probably sub 50. I don't even remember.
Yeah.
I'm just like huffing. I'm like the
Yeah.
last across the line. And I ran a 56 second, which is like fast if you're a 5K runner, like a
Right.
5,000
Exactly.
meter runner, but like
That's a good
so
speed training session, you know?
so slow. Yeah, that's so slow for a sprinter. That's like I'm halfway, and the winners are already done. But like I'm not going to step on stage and be Mr. Olympia. You can pump
Right.
all the drugs, training, and everything into me. I mean,
Yep.
short of removing my limbs and replacing them.
Right.
I mean,
That's why I
which
mean I always jokingly
is
said I
fine.
go even if you look at the guys that are on it, like a Ronnie Coleman or Arnold Schwarzenegger that all did
Yeah,
it, whatever. I go, but if you look at them when they were like 19 years old, they were more built and developed at like
oh,
19 or 20 years old before they ever touched anything than guys that I know that have been on this stuff for 10 years.
I couldn't
So they
agree
go,
more.
that's just genetic. They were just meant to do it. That's it. You know what I mean? So
Oh yeah, especially when you see those old videos of Arnold doing a lot of calisthenics, and he's just
right,
literally push-ups and pull-ups, and
right,
his just frame was just thick, and he
right.
obviously had a genetic predisposition,
Exactly.
which is really
Predisposition. Yeah.
so. I wanted to transition with you really quick. So you've had a lengthy career, dude. I knew you'd been in the game for a while. I did not know you've been in the game for quite a while, man. I love that. You've got
Basically, straight
years.
out of the gate, like straight out of high school. I mean, when I started coaching at 20 and I started training in the gym, so not that I was certified or anything back then, but it was basically just me lifting and kids wanted to lift with me. So it's been about 20 years straight up.
Those years count though, man. Those years just in the game, learning, taking notes, trying stuff out. And I think that's the beauty of what you did is you got to train a lot of different people. You saw
Mm.
a lot of different squats, a lot of different deadlifts, a lot of different hip positions, stances, and you've been able to collect a lot of workable data, if you will, and just life experience, right? I feel like you just become a better coach just from getting more life experience, and you can
Yep.
become wiser, and on top of of course the scientific knowledge and the know-how. So you were doing athletics, a lot of like team training, a lot of team strength and conditioning. Now you're
Yep.
training adult groups.
Mm.
So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear, and feel free to give like more of a cliff notes on this. You don't have to go super in depth, but let's
Sure.
say mom of two comes in, or Joe Blow Jabroni comes
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
They want to, they haven't worked out in a while. They want to get out of pain. They want to lose X number of pounds and get stronger, feel better, and all that stuff. What's your game plan? What's your playbook?
Yeah, I mean, number one for me, I mean, a lot of people like to do a lot of assessments and stuff like that, but generally, like my foundation in sports and stuff is that you don't obviously when you come in with large groups, you don't, and even this is individualized. I'm not a big fan of doing those kinds of things. I'm more like let's come in if you have certain pains and issues. I'm like, I'll put people just through like a general physical preparation warm up, and I just watch them move. Which people say, oh, listen. I go, listen. If I tell someone to like do a high knee walk or do a lateral lunge, just walking up and down the turf, or certain things like you might not think that I'm paying attention to certain things, but I'm telling you, like the mind is always cooking, and like I'm looking and saying, like, okay, they probably have a limitation here, they probably have something here. We need to add in maybe some band work for this, or we're looking for stretches for this, you know what I mean, or to get them moving better and feeling better. Generally, then it's just looking at the lowest. I never really know the right way to describe it. I always try to think of the right word, but I always look at like, you know, you want the minimum required dosage to have a synergistic effect for long term.
Yeah,
So everyone's always trying to come in the door and being like, hey man, like I got to lose 50 pounds and I got to lose it in 6 weeks. And I'm like, okay, well, that's pretty much unrealistic unless we cut your arm or leg off,
yeah.
uh, like the
Ruin-
6 week challenge or this or that. And I go, probably from 0 to 6 weeks, we can definitely make some pretty good progress depending on how crazy or somebody's willing to really go. But I go, now what's the long term trade off and side effects? I go, that's great. You did good for those 6 weeks. I go, now where are you going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Because I go, if you're looking to get healthy to live for a longer, better life, then just coming in going gung ho for 4 weeks is never going to get the job done, you know? Um, so, basically allowing them to come in for like 1 or 2 sessions. And I basically, like I said, I watch them move. I have two very basic level workouts. The first time I ever work with anybody outside of maybe like if they join the group, I pretty much will let anybody come join the group, regardless of training age. And I just scale the workouts, to them. So if like the group in the morning is doing, box squats with a barbell, like I'll have them do goblet squats to a box and just watch them. So they're still doing the same movement patterns. They're just going to do the lowest common denominator of that movement pattern. You know, the one movement I actually think where it's people always say like, oh, you have to be able to do X amount of push-ups before you can bench a barbell. And I'm like, well, if somebody comes in and they're 250 pounds or 200, 300 pounds or whatever, and they're 50, 60 pounds overweight, I go, benching a 45-pound bar is actually going to be easier for them than doing a push-up. Some people don't understand that. So I'm like struggling to do a push, trying to struggle to get to 10 push-ups to be able to get to the bar. I'm like, well, maybe if I take their barbell bench from 45 to 95 while working on some push-ups on the side, those things, and they lose 10 or 15 pounds in the process, those things might synergistically meet in the middle. And all of a sudden, magically, their push-ups get better because they were actually able to get stronger pushing some weight. So I've looked at things from both ends of the spectrum, and I do understand, people say that like, yeah, get your body weight stuff right first. And I'm like, that isn't always the case. And some people like I'm sure you've trained and I've trained many, many of them. I go, especially when it's like a younger athlete or someone of their college athletes that I train, I'm like, we have 8 weeks in the summer or something to get them ready for whatever they're going to do. Or that's an 8 week or a 4 week winter session. I go, whatever the case may be. And I go, not that I like to push it, but I go, we can't waste all 4 weeks trying to get them to do one push up. So I have to find the recommended dosage of an exercise that I can get them to make progress in that time frame that I have. Now, like I said, my training, I'm 40 now, and I said, hey, I'm healthy, my heart's good, these things are good. I look at it and go, if you show up to my gym 40 years from now and it's still there and I'm still alive, I go, you bet your ass you're going to see me squatting at 80 years old.
Hell
So my
yeah.
goal and my game plan is to make sure that 40 years from now, I still have the ability to squat. So that doesn't mean I'm going to go gung ho. Like, even if I plan to do a powerlifting meet next year or whatever, like, I'm never going to go foot to the gas crazy. I'm not willing to injure myself or set myself back. So it's all long term progress. Whatever that looks like or means to different people is different. But that's when people say, like, those people come in, I have this injury, that I go, okay, well, how long did it take you to get that injury? Like if you're 100 pounds overweight, how long did that take you? 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Like, oh, I always have low back pain, blah, blah, whatever. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's chronic, whatever. Okay. Did that happen yesterday? Like, did you hurt your back? Or has this just crept up over the last 6 years? Right. And they're like, oh, yeah, well, it's just kind of crept, like, I noticed it, and then it's been a year or two, and then I kind of really didn't do anything or whatever. And they're like, okay, well, I'm like, well, I'm sure we can alleviate some of the symptoms in a shorter period of time. However, to keep it corrected for a long period of time, that means you've now made this change in your lifestyle and this choice, and these things we're doing, you're going to have to now do them for the rest of your life. If you just do this for the 10 or 12 weeks, and it's like, people go to physical therapy and they're like, okay, I fixed it. Everything feels great. And then they just walk out. They never go to the gym. They never do anything else. And then it's like 12 weeks later, they're back in the same exact spot they were in week one because they just didn't do any of the exercise. They just stopped everything. They were like, oh, it's fixed. I'm like, realistically, nothing's ever fixed because they go, whatever caused the problem was probably how you were living. So if you just
Yep.
went back to living exactly how you were living, guess what's coming back? The exact same problem, And I go, and I understand it because I've had to go to physical therapy multiple times. I have a bunch of injuries from sports, like I said. So sometimes some things will flare up, and it's not by me not doing the right thing. I just go, unfortunately, my buddy put through the ringer. I can still do all the right things, but sometimes you just need a little assistance. And that's true too. And that's not a bad thing. But I also never stop doing all the other things that are going to help it in the meantime. I continually keep trying to do all the right things for a long time. I hope that explains kind of what you were saying, but asking.
No, that more than explains it. I love that, and I think that's just I know I keep geeking out on Simon Sinek, but one of his other books is The Infinite Game, and that's what he
Mhm.
talks about. Is you're not, and he talks more so about business, but 100% applicable to what we're talking about because we're talking about strength, conditioning, and obviously business and health and longevity. Like it's all related.
That's all I'm related. Yep.
Yeah. I sound like a hippie, right? I'm like, it's all related, man. It's all
Yeah.
connected. But in all seriousness, his big thing is let's have a long term focus. It's not how much money can I make this cycle, this quarter. How much can I pay out to the shareholders? How many pounds can I lose in this 6 weeks? how many pounds can I put on my squat this 6 weeks and just focus, hyper focus on that. It's how long can we stay at it? Can I be
Right.
squatting at 80? Dude, if you're squatting at 80, if I pull up Instagram or whatever the next social media platform is, and you're fucking squatting at 80, I don't care if it's just your body weight or whatever. I'm fucking fired up. I'm like, dude,
That's awesome.
I'm
Right.
coming. Let's hit it. I'll be 74, so I'll be a little younger. So
Yeah.
I'll be, and you'll still be out squatting me probably.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole. I mean, not to say that's the whole plan, but I mean, hopefully, I said if I get everything working right, I said, whatever, we'll make it happen. That's it for sure.
Oh, I think that's amazing, man. And I follow a similar philosophy as you. I have some kind of like intro level. I say intro. Workouts that I go off of, and I do the same thing. We scale it. I tell everyone it's like a volume knob and a stereo. I'm going to turn it up or down
Yeah.
based on where you're at. It's not.
Right.
It's not a matter of like winning or losing or pass or fail. Because people hear the word assessment, they're like, oh shit, I gotta like, and then they start
Right.
acting differently when they know they're being assessed, and they're like, oh shit, let me not mess this up.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
In
Exactly.
research, they call it the Hawthorne effect. It's like you're being studied, so you act differently.
Right.
And versus like, hey, let's just warm up and work out. You're keeping it more low key, and they're like, okay, cool. And then, like you said, if they can't get their knee up to 90 degrees at the hip, like that tells you a lot that you need to
Right.
know.
I go. That's already one red. That's one red flag. We got some work to do there already, right out of the gate.
Bingo.
Like.
You know about their hip mobility, you know about the hip flexor strength. I mean, maybe, and if they come up, they're a little bit wobbly, or maybe really
Right.
wobbly, or they can't really do it. The
Or they
foot
can't even do it. They can't even balance on one leg. Period. You know what I mean?
like,
Like, yeah.
I know what we need to work on. We're
Right.
obviously we need to work in, the bilateral stuff, but of course the unilateral stuff, and
Yeah.
obviously working on stability work as well. So I love that. I do that too, and I kind of wondered if I was the only one. But the internet has a great way of showing you that you're just not that special, which I love.
Yeah.
In a very humbling way. But Brett
Yeah.
Contreras, one of my favorite quotes of his is, I used to think I was really strong until YouTube was invented. And
Right.
then I started seeing people put up way bigger numbers. I mean, he's very strong though, let's be honest, for his
Yeah.
weight, his
Yep.
age.
As I said, there's always a bigger fish in the sea, man. That's a fact. Like
Always.
always.
That's it, man. Always.
I go unless you have the world record, which if you do, then you are the big fish. That's it. But I go, there's probably somebody coming to take it. So
That's right. But hey,
just
just
be on
like
the lookout.
the pumping iron, the wolf at the top of the hill, he can stay, he can only go down. And Arnold says, or stay up, which, he did that
Right.
for 6 more
For a good
times.
amount of time, but I go, he ain't going to show up and beat any of the guys. Not, you know what I mean? I go, unfortunately, I always jokingly say to people, I go, the one thing I know for sure in life is that time is undefeated. And
100%.
it's coming for everybody. I go, and you can hold on, and you can do all the right things, and you can make it as best as you can possibly make it. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be what you were at 20 and 30 when you're 60 or 70. But you can still be better at 70 than some people at 50
Oh
because
yeah.
you're doing all the right things. You know what I mean? So, and I know some 60. I mean, there's some in the morning class that are 60 years old, 60, 65 years old, and they would crush some of the kids that come in the gym that are in their 20s and 30s easily.
100%. Oh
You
yeah.
know?
Oh
Easily.
yeah, no, I agree with you, and I will say I am a little bit of an outlier in as far as energy goes. I have ADHD. I'm naturally a very wired person.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, at the playground when I'm with my daughter, I try really hard. I mean, sometimes you got to take a call, you got a quick work thing. I get it. I'm not going to sit here and bash or hate on working parents. I totally, especially not single parents. But when I'm at the park, man, like if I'm spending my whole time on the fucking phone, like come on, dude, like that's not what we're here for. We're here to play and learn and have a good time. And sometimes it embarrasses my wife, but I will be like, I'm in the game. Let's do it. I'm running, jumping, swinging on the monkey bars, and like jumping out of the swing, and definitely doing some dangerous stuff that I probably shouldn't be doing in front of my almost 4-year-old daughter. But it's so funny. I'll be doing that, and all the other parents are looking at me like, "What the hell is this guy on? Is he like doing lines of cocaine in the corner?"
Right? Yeah. They're like, no,
And
I was
yeah,
just. They're like, yeah, like I was born with natural lines of cocaine. You don't understand.
exactly. It's in my veins. But the ability to physically do that stuff is a byproduct of my training, staying
Right.
strong, working on again, working on power, working on athleticism, and the mobility to be able to access obviously those ranges of motion, be able to still cut and not fuck my knee up.
Yeah, just fall over and just blow something out. Blow a tire out, as they always say.
Exactly. And we're still human. I'm almost 35, so like stuff happens. Like you
Oh, yeah.
bend down wrong and you tweak something. That's just life. But
Right.
but that's my goal, man. I want to be, you're squatting at 80. I want to be squatting at 82. I want to be
Right.
at the park with my grandkids running around and
Right.
shit. If I get lucky and the time works out, if I got great grandkids,
Yeah.
I'm walking. I
Yeah.
may be
Yeah.
like, I may just be like walking really slow and pretending to be like a zombie from an old
Right.
like old George Romero film, but I'll still be
Yeah.
playing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
still
if I'm breathing, I'm trying. That's what I say.
that's it. If I'm breathing, I'm trying. So,
Mhm.
but that's awesome, dude. This was a great chat. If I didn't have to get off, I would probably stay on another hour and just keep riffing with you, man. I love what you're doing. I just think you're a badass human. I'm so glad we got to get to know each other. Although most of it's been virtually through sliding into DMs and
Yeah.
sending each
Yeah.
other. But I think that I love your philosophy. I love your story. I'm so excited to share this with our audience. Talking about because you've really every time you've gone to level up, you've almost been hit with a double whammy. You've
Oh
had
yeah.
a business, career related obstacle, and then you've had a health related obstacle, and you've just kept going. So take that. I mean, take that lesson, guys. Everyone that's listening, just keep going.
Mhm.
Obviously, sometimes sometimes you do. It is good to quit things if it's
Mhm.
maybe not something that you really wanted to do. But this was something that you really got into and committed to, and you're rocking it. So I love the journey. Where can everybody find you? Give me all your social media handles, and how can people get some of that awesome kick-ass merch?
Yeah. So the easiest way is the Instagram. I always say is the at BearFit Athletics,
Yeah.
and then Facebook is the same thing, BearFit Athletics. For merch, we just do special orders. So I mean, if you want anything, I can do one-off orders and send them to people. Sometimes we do like merch drops when we do some new stuff. So there's no specific sales place. Like I'm doing an order right now that's going in November 1st. If you do go on the Instagram page and like the links, you can go on there and you can order the new merch that we just my friend. I actually work with a friend of mine, but even like these hoodies and stuff, I just get them made through a company and I can have them sent anywhere at any time. Um, so it's pretty much just reach out to me if you ever see anything that you like or whatever. That's the easiest way.
Oh, that's great, man. Yeah, and that reminds me, I need to order something. I definitely want one of those tumblers. Super random question. You don't happen to have kid size options, do you? Can I get Vivi a BearFit workout tank top or a t-shirt?
Yeah, I can get those made like custom off on the side. Be different. One probably I don't know if it'd be the new logo. I don't know if like my because my friend won't like she can't really do one at a time when she does like production for it.
Oh,
But
sure.
any like the other old logos or whatever, like I know most of the kids like the cool graffiti logo I have.
Yeah.
Just like the green, like lime green one with like the dripping lime green or whatever. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
We can chat and let me know and I can get you that.
yeah, we'll save this for offline, but I'm gonna be doing some toddler sports coaching. So maybe we'll talk about some stuff in that regards for like an entire team to make it more worth your while. And I'm gonna put all these links below, by the way, for everyone. So I'll put the Instagram, the Facebook, the link to the shop, and yeah. Is there anything else that you want to add? I mean, you've been killing it, dude. You've just been like Eminem at the end of 8 Mile, just cooking. I've just been sitting in
That's
the back, just letting you rock and roll.
Yeah, really. I mean, that covered most of it. I mean, if anybody that if you have any followers or whatever, anybody that lives in the area, they ever want to come check the place out, just drop me a DM or whatever. It's also barefitathletics at gmail.com is the email.
Oh, perfect.
Shoot me an email if you ever want to or whatever. And doors always open, always welcome. I just say, as Demarco said, it's probably a gym if you come. It's when you walk inside, people always ask for the tour. I go, you walk in the tour is the tour. What you see is what you get, and if you're willing to work hard and that's the kind of place you like, it's the kind of place for you. I go, it's not the kind of place for everybody, and I'll be honest about that. But the people
Yeah,
who like it, the people who like it love it, and the people who don't and want something more cushy or fancy or whatever, there's plenty of other places they can choose. I'm not here to make everybody happy. I always said it's like if I had a dream garage gym, I would have one of everything that I have. So I built a gym based off of that, and I have 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 of everything I have to incorporate it for everybody else. So the people who like that like it, and I said if they don't, they don't. That's no harm, no foul. So it's not everything is ever for everybody. I can't remember whoever made that quote. Is like if you try to make everybody happy, you're just going to make yourself insane.
bingo.
So
No,
that's it.
gotta
Yeah,
know. I feel like you got to know who you are and who you're serving, and especially know the exact opposite, which is who you're not serving, so that
right.
you're honing in on on your messaging and marketing. Dude, this was awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Bear. Justin, obviously, I know I call you Coach Bear, but
yeah, Bear, JD, Bear, they're all the same. It's all good.
you answered everything. But no, I really appreciate your time, and I'm super excited to share your story with everybody. And thank you all so much for tuning in. This was another awesome Strength with Purpose show podcast. And if you have any questions, want to reach out to Bear, feel free to reach out to him via Instagram or email or on the Facebook page. If you are in the greater Boston area, this is the gym for you. I can tell you that as someone who has been a trainer for 12 years and has been a lifter for about almost 23 years. Wow. We're getting old, man. So I can tell you it's a wonderful facility. It's super clean, super well run. And it's just a good vibe in there. It's a good working class vibe. Without the rah beat your chest high school bullshit. So you're people in there that are there to work. You know, it's not cushy like you said.
I will add one thing is that it's definitely, as most people would say, it's the anti-Globo gym model.
Anti-Globo gym model, exactly.
Yeah. So but if you ever watched the movie, if you ever watched the movie Dodgeball, we're like average Joe's gym, but a little bit maybe more
average gym
based, you know.
Yeah. Wait, are you telling me you don't have all of your receipts and your documents in a closet? Just
they're somewhere, but yeah.
I love that scene. She opens up the closet like, oh my God. An accountant's worst nightmare. But dude, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Awesome. Thank you, man. You too.